Xander, Elias, Ellie, and Faith were exhausted. It had been a long 24 hours, and they were still coming to terms with all the crazy things they had just seen and done. After waking up to find their beds floating through the ocean and traveling to a lost, deserted tropical island, they had discovered a treasure chest and got chased down by a gang of angry pirates until they barely escaped through the river that led them right back to their house. Believe me, the experience was even crazier than it sounds, and these kids weren't quite sure what was real and what was their imagination. And these kids were tired. After the long day they'd had, all they could think about was sleep. So the four of them laid back down in their beds without realizing that their beds had only just begun to work their magic. There were still many more things and places they had yet to discover that were beyond their wildest imagination. As Faith was laying in bed that night, she was thinking back on all the events of the day, and she looked out her bedroom window. But as she was looking closer, it almost looked like something was moving outside. And it wasn't just one thing. Everything outside her bedroom window was quickly passing by the house. And as if that wasn't strange enough, she started to feel her bed rumbling as noises started coming from outside her room. If she didn't know any better, she would have thought she was on a giant train or something. So she whispered to her sister, "Ellie, do you hear that? Look outside. Does it look like everything is moving out there?" But Ellie didn't answer. Faith turned over to look at Ellie, but she was gone. And as she looked around her dimly lit room, she didn't even recognize the room she was in. She stood up and walked to the window as she felt the floor beneath her gently swaying back and forth. And when she pulled back the curtains and looked out the window, she saw a huge glacier-covered mountain off in the distance, right beside a massive lake. Well, one thing was for certain. She wasn't in her bedroom anymore. And the longer Faith looked out the window, the more it started to look familiar, almost as if she had been here before. Suddenly, she heard someone pounding on the door to her room. She quickly went to open the door, and she saw her sister, Ellie. She was standing in the hallway, and she said, "Quick, let me in." Ellie rushed into Faith's room and said, "Faith, do you realize where we are? We're on a train. I've been searching all over this place trying to find you. You see those mountains out there? We're in Alaska. We've been here before." Ellie and Faith had been on this train before on a family trip, and that's why this place looked so familiar. And as Faith and Ellie walked out of the room and into the aisle of the train car, they thought it was kind of strange, but no one else was on this train. They even walked up to the next car. They didn't see anyone there either. And so they walked up to the next one and the next one. Nobody. And they kept walking from one car to the next until they got all the way to the front of the train where the main engine was. "There must be someone up here, right?" said Faith. "Trains like this can't drive themselves, can they?" And as they opened up the door to the engine room, they couldn't believe who they saw. It was their two brothers, Xander and Elias. What were they doing driving the train? Elias turned and said, "You guys woke up in the train too, huh?" For some reason, I can't say I'm surprised. "You two know how to drive a train?" said Ellie. "Of course we do," said Xander. "All you gotta do is push this lever and honk this horn." Ellie said, "How do we get out of here, you guys?" But before anyone could answer, they felt the train starting to slow down. And before they knew what was even going on, the train came to a complete stop. It was almost like the train wanted them to get off here or something. So the kids looked out the window and saw that the train had stopped somewhere in the middle of the forest. They weren't near anything. They were in the middle of nowhere. So the kids stepped down the stairs from the train onto the ground. "Why do you think we stopped here?" Elias said. "This has got to be some kind of mistake." And as they stood there beside the train looking into the woods, the train gave a loud blast of its whistle, and it started rolling away. The kids tried running after it so they could jump back on, but it was no use. It was going way too fast. Oh no, what were they going to do now? The four kids were stuck by themselves in the middle of the forest with no idea how to get home. And this wasn't a tropical island like before. It was cold out here. And right as they were about to panic, they heard the sound of a barking dog in the distance. It got louder and louder until they saw this dog running over the hill. Wait, that's our dog. That's Lacey. Lacey ran up to the four kids and Xander grabbed her collar and she started pulling hard. "What are you doing, Lacey? What's wrong?" But of course, Lacey couldn't talk, so she just kept pulling. "I think she wants us to follow her," said Xander. So he let Lacey go, and they followed her over a river and through the woods until they saw a light shining through the dark trees. And as they walked closer, it looked like it was a small cottage, and Lacey was taking them right to it. So they ran up to the cottage and peered in through the window, where they saw both their mom and dad and their puppy, Kauai, inside. Their dad was hard at work building what looked like a small bed. Was that a crib? And sitting right next to him was their mom. And they couldn't be sure, but it almost looked like she was pregnant. So they all opened the door and rushed into the house and gave their parents a great big hug. Ellie said, "How did you both get here? Did you know we were coming here or something? And Mom, are you pregnant?" And their mom said, "We were waiting for you kids. Dad and I wanted you to know we're going to have another baby. Can you believe it?" And the four kids were so excited. Faith screamed and Ellie cried. Xander cheered and gave Elias a high five. They couldn't wait to have a new baby in their family. And as all the commotion settled down, Ellie said, "Wait a minute, so you meant for us to find you out here? Does that mean you know about our magical beds and how they took us to the island and then brought us here?" "Well, of course," said Mom. "Those beds are very special and they're unlike any other beds on Earth. Only your dad knows how to make them. In fact, he's building a new one for the baby right now." "How do you know how to make beds like that, Dad?" said Elias. "Using a very special Japanese wood that was passed down through our family many generations ago," said Dad. Elias seemed intrigued. "So all these adventures? It was all because of the beds?" Their dad chuckled. "Well, these beds are just a tool. They take you where your heart and mind truly need to go. Today, you needed to be here with us to share in the joy of our growing family." Faith spoke up, "But why the pirate island, Dad?" Mom smiled. "Well, life is filled with adventures. Some are fun and exciting, and some are hard and scary. These beds may take you on a magical journey, but it's up to you to navigate and learn from them." "Are we going to go on more adventures?" Xander asked with his eyes wide. And Dad winked. "Well, only if you're brave enough to dream big." And then the kids huddled together and talked and remembered the amazing adventures they had already been on, and they wondered where their beds were going to take them next. And as the night went on, the family gathered by the fireplace and shared stories and sang songs together, while outside, the snow began to fall gently, blanketing the world in white. But inside that cozy cottage was the magic of love, a growing family, and the promise of many more adventures to come. Do you ever find yourself wondering when the next episode is going to come out for the Storyland podcast? I know they don't come out as much as we all want them to, but if you want to be the first to know about when the next story is going to drop, all you got to do is follow us on Instagram or Facebook, or just go to storyland.show, and you'll find links to all the different places online where you can listen and watch, and even leave a comment and make suggestions about other story ideas that you might have. Just go to storyland.show, or again, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Just search for Storyland, all one word, podcast. Storyland Podcast, and you should be able to find us there. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.